my friend Paul Allen and I actually snuck into places at the University of Washington where they had computers that weren't being used at night. And so we were fascinated by what the computer could do, but very few people were getting exposure. We had to go out of our way, and we were lucky that we did it all. And so then when the idea of moving the computer onto a chip that Intel would make, and that would make the computer literally millions of times cheaper than the ones we were using, so both more powerful and available to people on a personal level, then the idea of, okay, it would be very different, the software you needed, the way the industry would work. We were super lucky to be there when that was happening.
So what did your family think? Did they say there's something wrong with this young man? He wants to just do computers?
They knew I was obsessed with computers, that I would skip athletics, that I'd go in overnight, that I'd leave the house sometimes when they prefer I wouldn't go work at night on these things. And so it was kind of considered a little strange. And the big moment was when I said, instead of going to part of my senior year, that I wanted to go work for a company writing software. So they were great about allowing that to be my hobby.
You went to Harvard and you dropped out. Have you ever thought how your life could be better off if you had gotten your Harvard degree?
Well, I'm a weird dropout because I take college courses all the time. I love learning company courses and things, so I loved being a student. And there were smart people around, and they fed you, and they gave you these nice grades that made you feel smart. So I feel it was unfortunate that I didn't get to stay there. But I don't think I missed any knowledge because, whatever I needed to learn, I was still in a learning mode.
So in the early days, you were just a college dropout. You were very young looking. Did you get taken seriously by businessmen who were much older?
For some people, that youth and geekiness was like, hey, should we trust them? That's so weird. We've never seen something like that before. So yes, we had to fight for acceptance. I couldn't rent cars, so I had to take cabs around because I was too young, and probably some people were a little tough. But then as we got a little bit of success, people were fascinated by this deep belief we had in software.
Okay. So when Microsoft is moving forward, you decided to take the company public in 1986. And at that point, you are a billionaire.
Yeah,
close to it?
Pretty close to it. Within a year of going public, I think. There's some Fortune cover that says the deal that made Bill Gates $360 million or some weird thing like that.
All right. How did it change your life, or didn't it change your life at all?
Well, that whole period of time was amazing because I was hiring people as fast as I could. I'd brought in Steve Ballmer, who was very good at that, and he was helping out. We had a sense of urgency that we wanted to lead the way. There was this graphics interface thing with Windows that we wanted to do. So I was super busy. And the idea that I could hire so quickly and invest and build this worldwide company was fascinating to me. But I was really busy. So, if some friend had tried to call me, I wouldn't have had too much time for that. I was really into building this company. And I was going out and telling people about the magic of software, which was good for Microsoft, but also helping them understand the opportunities and the huge change agent that software and eventually software plus the internet would become. So I was having fun. It was amazing. But I always thought, hey, we're one step away from not, leading here. We gotta keep doing better.
When you had the famous IBM contract, you won the contract to produce their operating system. Why did they let you, in effect, own it, and they had to license it? Was that a mistake on their part?
Yeah, this is before graphics interface, when you still just have text on the screen. And so the software MS-DOS was a key thing. So it got to be more of a high-end machine, including this MS-DOS. They didn't see how big this machine would be, and their legal department didn't want to take responsibility for the source code. They had a fairly limited license.
Right.
And that we understood that this was a seminal machine and other people would do similar machines. So that was fairly advantageous to us. They didn't see the value as being in the software. Right. They thought that the hardware was the key and software was just a sort of necessary thing. So if they had realized the vision we had, which was that software over time would be way more important than hardware, they would have negotiated probably a different deal.
You have a fair amount of money for anybody your age at that time, certainly. Did you say, I'll go splurge and buy a nice car, I'll buy an airplane, I'll buy a boat, or you just didn't really care about that?
I bought one thing that was a tiny bit of a splurge, was that my first car that I owned was a Porsche 911. It was used, but it was an incredible car, and that was actually when I was down in Albuquerque, and sometimes when I would want to think at night, I'd just go out and drive around at high speed, and fortunately I didn't kill myself doing that.
And what about Steve Jobs in those days? What was your relationship with him in the early days, and how did it change?
Well, we were both there at the very beginning. The Apple I was a kit computer that Steve Wozniak designed, and he worked with Steve, and they came and offered it at various of these computer club meetings, and we went to lots of computer club meetings. So we were sort of colleagues in pitching the gospel of personal computing. We were kind of competitors. The time we worked together most intensely was after the IBM PC came out. Steve had a group, actually a small group at Apple, that was doing the Macintosh, and he came to us early on and asked us if we'd commit resources. We actually put more people on the project than Apple did, and did the early application software that used that mouse graphics interface. And so it was a huge win both for Microsoft and for Apple when the Macintosh became so successful.
When your mother first said, I'd like you to come and have dinner with me and Warren Buffett will be here, you should meet him, you didn't seem that interested. Why was that?
Well, Warren, I thought of as somebody who bought and sold securities, which is a very zero-sum thing. That's not curing disease or a cool piece of software. And the idea of, kind of looking at volume curves, and that's why it was so shocking when I met him.
So your company grows, it becomes successful, becomes the most valuable company in the world at one point. At what point do you say, I've made a fair amount of money, I don't need to do this anymore, I want to do something else with my life?
1995 is a big year where we shipped a product conveniently called Windows 95, and our software's doing well. And we emerge, we had always had the greatest depth of engineering, and we were slightly the biggest, but we really emerge as the successful company. And so I started thinking about, wow, there's a lot of value here at Microsoft. What have other philanthropists done historically? So during the 90s, I'm thinking about that. My mom tragically passes away in the same year as I get married in 1994. My dad is volunteering to help out, think about the philanthropy piece. So it was in the year 2000 that I put $20 billion into the foundation. And then it became the biggest foundation at that point.
You mentioned you got married in 1994. You married a Duke graduate. How did you have time to woo somebody when you're running your company, and how much time did that take?
Well, she was an employee of Microsoft, and we had run into each other actually in New York City, we ended up sitting together in a dinner. And, she's an amazing person, and, kind of caught me by surprise how much that engaged my attention, even versus all this exciting Microsoft stuff I was doing. So we, dated on and off for about 5 years, and then decided to get married.
So you have decided that your foundation would focus principally, but other things as well, but principally on health in Africa and K-12 education in the United States. Is that right?
Yeah, health of all the poorest, but
Okay.
Africa's paradigmatic.
So how did you come to those conclusions that those were the two things you wanted to work on as opposed to everything else?
We talked about it a lot, so that's the decision that Melinda and I made. We wanted to take the greatest injustice in the world, something that we could make a huge difference in, and that's health. Now, we broadened that a bit by doing agriculture and sanitation and some other things. And then we wanted to take a cause that would help the U.S. Be as strong as it could, and in that case, trying to help improve educational opportunity is our big thing.
You and Melinda go into the field. Why do you feel you need to go into the field in Africa or Latin America, any part of the world where you're giving away money, and actually meet people that you're giving money to and learn?
Well, I've chosen to spend my time, and Melinda spends her time, building the foundation as an institution that really has an impact. And I get a lot of enjoyment. This is, how I've taken everything I've learned from Microsoft and the position I'm in, and helping to drive the strategy and go out and see what's going on with this work. That's my full-time job, and it's a wonderful job.
Your foundation has a certain life. It's not a perpetual foundation. Is it, I think, is it 20 years after either you or your wife, the last one to live, dies, that it would end? Is that how it works?
That's right. The way that we're managing the institution and keeping it excellent and designing it to solve problems that can be totally solved. So we work on malaria. This foundation should be able to participate in getting rid of that. All these infectious diseases that so disproportionately hurt the poor and really explain most of the difference between why a poor child has a 50 times greater chance of dying than a child in a wealthy country. In 30 or 40 years, those problems should have been brought to an end. And whatever the new problems philanthropy should go after, the people who were alive then and picking great executives and building institutions to go solve, they'll do a much better job than we can just writing down a little guidance. So it is a limited time foundation. It's so different the way he lets there be a dialogue.
When your mother first said, I'd like you to come and have dinner with me and Warren Buffett will be here, you should meet him, you didn't seem that interested. Why was that?
Well, Warren, I thought of as somebody who bought and sold securities, which is a very zero-sum thing. That's not curing disease or a cool piece of software. And the idea of, kind of looking at volume curves, and it doesn't invent anything. And so I thought my way of looking at the world, what I wanted to figure out and do, and what he looked at, that there wouldn't be much intersection. And that's why it was so shocking when I met him. He was the first person to really ask me about software and software pricing, and why wasn't IBM, with all of their strength, able to overwhelm Microsoft, and what was going to happen in terms of how software would change the world. And he let me ask him about, okay, well, why do you invest in certain industries, and why are some banks more profitable than others? And he was clearly a broad systems thinker, and so it started a conversation that has been fun and enriching, and an incredible friendship that was completely unexpected.
And he taught you how to play bridge, or did you already know?
I knew how to play bridge, but I had done it, our family had done it. And then because Warren, it was a chance to spend time with Warren, I renewed my bridge skill, at first very poorly, but both golf and bridge were things that we did in our hours that we got to goof off together.
You given up on golf?
Well, Warren gave up on golf a few years ago, and so my primary excuse to play golf has gone away. So I'm golfing not much now. tennis is become my primary sport.
Warren Buffett called you one day and said, by the way, I'm going to give you most of my money. Were you surprised when he said he wanted to give you all this money from his wealth to your foundation?
That was a complete surprise because Warren is the best investor and he's built this unbelievable company. And he was giving me advice about all the things I was doing. I was learning so much from him. But his wealth was devoted to a foundation that his wife was in charge of. And so tragically, she passed away. And so then he had to think that his initial plan wouldn't make sense. And much to my surprise, he decided that a part of the wealth, a little over 80% of it, would come to our foundation. So it was a huge honor, a huge responsibility, an incredible thing because it let us raise our level of ambition even beyond what we would have done without that by most definitions, the most generous gift of all time.
And you started with Warren and Melinda, the Giving Pledge. What is that about and how has that worked?
Well, Warren was brainstorming with us about how did philanthropists figure out what to do and how could they kind of help share with each other without giving up the diversity of what they did. And so he got us to do some dinners with people who are already doing amazing philanthropy and talk about how they built staff and picked causes. And not that they would give to the same things, but that they would, the quality and even how early people get engaged would be enhanced by the people getting together and making a public commitment to give the majority of their wealth away. And so that's become the Giving Pledge group.
You're the wealthiest man in the world for 20 years or more. How does it affect your life daily? People come up to you all the time and ask for money, or they expect you to buy them things. You've gotten tired of it? When you were doing Microsoft at the beginning, you were doing the coding yourself, and you would presumably know more about coding than just about anybody. But now that you have so many other responsibilities, when Microsoft develops a new piece of software, are you able to really talk to the software engineers in the same level that you could 20 years ago?
Well, I'm certainly nowhere near as hands-on as I was when I would either write the code or look it over and hire all the programmers. And in my career, this evolution of being an individual performer, then a manager of managers, and then setting broad strategy, you have to get used to the fact you don't have as much control. But I try and understand enough about software that the trade-offs we're making about what features should we put in, what the basic design should be. I still enjoy those discussions. And even today over at Microsoft, we get to talk about, okay, what should the next Office do? How can Windows be better? How's the user interface going to change when we have speech and handwriting and those things? So I'm able to participate, but it is a way more complex field, and I couldn't actually write all the code myself anymore.
When somebody turns on their computer today, they have to have 3 fingers usually, and they put a finger on Control, Alt, and Delete. And it seems a little awkward to do that. Why did you do that, and why did people have to have that mechanism to turn on the computer?
Well, fortunately, most machines nowadays have moved away from that. But the idea that we knew that there was logic in the keyboard that could detect a truly unique signal that would bypass the software that was running so you could know it was really starting over. Clearly, that ended up being an awkward piece of user interface. If we had to do it over again, we wouldn't do it. It sort of was in the chasm between Microsoft and IBM that it ended up being that way. And it's kind of become the poster child of, hey, couldn't you have made this stuff a little simpler?
So you're the wealthiest man in the world for 20 years or more. How does it affect your life daily? People come up to you all the time and ask for money, or they expect you to buy them things.
Fortunately, people know that that wealth is dedicated to the foundation. And so if they have ideas that are in the foundation's area, infectious disease, improving education, then it's super interesting to have them talk to me or talk to those people. I have the benefit of being well known, so I can go out and meet interesting people and share my views and get a lot of attention. I'd say net that's a benefit. When I'm out with the kids, then it can be a tiny bit of a drawback that you may not get as much privacy as you'd like. But overall, my success has allowed me to get more done, build partnerships, meet great people.
How do you deal with it when you want to go shopping, or you don't go to shopping?
Oh, I go shop. I go out to the theater.
And people don't come up to you all the time for selfies or something?
They can, yeah, but that's pretty quick. And people are usually very nice about it.
What about your children? Everybody who's wealthy, who has children, has to deal with how do you train your children to live with the wealth? How much do you give them? And how do you get them involved in philanthropies?
Well, our kids are young enough that the key focus is helping them, enjoy learning, get a great education. All of them will pick careers that aren't related to software philanthropy. They will strike out in their own direction and be great, in their own way, whatever it is they pick to do. So we've chosen that they'll have enough wealth that they'll never be poor or anything, but we're not going to take billions of dollars and have that define their life. The vast majority of the wealth is dedicated to the foundation, and so far, they're great kids, and they enjoy learning about what we're doing in Africa, and that may shape where they go with their lives, but it'll be up to them.
When people look back on what you've done 20 years from now, 30 years from now, what would you like to have people say Bill Gates achieved?
Well, I don't think it's important for me to be remembered specifically. I do hope that infectious disease is largely eliminated as a problem so that nobody's having to talk about it and people can focus on other issues. That would be a huge, great thing. If our work has helped improve U.S. education, that would be a huge, great thing. Most importantly are the people who really know me, my kids, that they feel I was a good father, gave them an opportunity to go create their own life.
The day
I'm John Heilman.
And I'm Mark Halpern. With all due respect to Tom Brady, would you say that your enthusiasm for Donald Trump has deflated? On the program tonight, Donald Trump's rigged rhetoric, and Republicans are shouting quid pro whoa. Today, the right went wild over new FBI documents that suggest a senior State Department official might have discussed with the FBI last year a change to the classification of one of Hillary Clinton's secret emails, possibly in exchange for more bureau resources overseas. We're going to talk about the merits and implications of that story later in the program. But first, with just 22 days left before Election Day, the polls are a little confusing. Yesterday, two national surveys told very different tales about the state of the race. One from NBC News and the Wall Street Journal shows Hillary Clinton leading by 11 points amongst likely voters in a four-way contest, 48 to 37% over Trump. But another highly respected poll from ABC News and the Washington Post suggests Clinton has only a 4-point lead over Trump, 47 to 43. Today, Monmouth University put out its own national survey showing Clinton up 12, and things are no clearer on the state level. Quinnipiac University has a bunch of battleground polling they put out today. Shows Clinton up 8 in Colorado, 6 in Pennsylvania, 4 in Florida, and a tied race in Ohio. But a CNN ORC poll out today shows Trump leading in Ohio by 4. CNN has Clinton up well within the margin of error, 1 in North Carolina, within the margin of error up 2 in Nevada. Two more polls I want to mention to you. In New Hampshire, a WBUR survey has Clinton leading by just 3 percentage points in that state that Trump visited over the weekend. And finally, in Virginia, Clinton has expanded her edge by a massive lead of 15 points, according to the widely respected Christopher Newport University poll that's out today. So, John, it's a lot of polling data. What is the actual state of the race right now?
Well, Mark, I'd like to say first, on behalf of our friend John Ralston, who we'll be seeing in Nevada when we head out to Las Vegas in the next day or so, that if you do it, I do it, not Nevada. Ralston's echoing in my ear. The second thing is I'm in Chicago here, where I spent most of this day with David Axelrod. And David Axelrod and I have discussed this polling at some length today. And one of the things that the point he made that our friend David Plouffe has made on other occasions, which is that right now, if you look at all these polls and take them all together, a couple things are clear. One, Hillary Clinton's never been behind in this race. Donald Trump's been behind. He's still behind nationally and in the battleground states. And if you look at those battleground state polls where there's been less erosion than there has been at the national level since Trump's problems, or the worst of his problems, began with the release of the Access Hollywood tape, it's still the case that she's in a better position in the battleground states right now than Barack Obama ever was in 2012 against Mitt Romney, and we all know how that turned out.
Yeah, he was an incumbent and a stronger candidate in a lot of ways. Look, Trump is still the underdog, but if you look at the states he must win in order to get close to 270 electoral votes, this national polling is catastrophic for him. If he loses by 5 points nationally, he's not going to win the election. It'll be a landslide. But the state polls, which are from roughly the same period, show that he can win. Take a look at this map. Give him all the Romney states, including North Carolina, a state where he's behind the Trump people concede, but where the state polls are closer. Give him Florida, give him Ohio, give him Iowa, give him the state where Las Vegas is, the name of which I cannot pronounce. Give him those, he's at 265. Now, he still needs to get 5 more to win. And giving him all those states is just a mental exercise. He's probably behind in at least 3 of them, maybe a little bit ahead in Ohio and Iowa. But my point is, as dire as things are for Trump right now, if he has a little bit of a role nationally, and if he can win those 5 states, he'll get to 265 electoral votes, then who knows? He's the underdog. He has been all along. He's had a horrible stretch. But the state polling, where he's doing better with independents and better with women, for the most part, than he's doing nationally, shows that this thing is not over.
Right, but here's the thing. You're saying let's do it, that it's a mental exercise to give him all those states. I think it's like an exercise in mental gymnastics. I mean, you're saying that he's within striking distance, but behind in a bunch of states that he has to win all of. It's like he has to, this is like, you're saying he's within striking distance of pulling an inside straight. I mean, if it was just 1 or 2 states where there were must-win states for him that he was behind in, I'd see there was like more of a plausible path. But we're talking here about a national wave that's moving against him. And in these states where you're right, he hasn't lost at that much altitude, he's still where he was a few weeks ago, which was needing to run an inside straight and overcome obstacles and deficits in all of those states at once.
Yep, take them one by one. Ohio, he's generally been ahead, and the Clinton folks think he could win there. He could win Iowa. You know, I think the silver state is a question mark, but he's been ahead at times. So then you get out to Florida and North Carolina. He's got huge enthusiasm in Florida. He spent a lot of time there. I don't know that he'll win it, but I think he could. It's down to North Carolina, where he is behind. But when you say, well, he's got to run inside straight on all 5, in 3 of them, I think he's even or ahead.
It's not, but you just basically said you don't know that he's ahead in Florida. He's behind in almost all the Florida polling. So, you know, if you give him everything, then you're giving him everything, and he's still at 265.
Yeah, you give him the 3, give him for a mental exercise the 3 where he's even or ahead. Then he's got to find a way to win Florida and North Carolina, and then the last 5 is really tough.
And he's still at 265.
Yeah, right. That's why he's deeply the underdog in this race.
All right, we agree then on that for sure. Donald J. Trump has, for a while now, been doubling and tripling down, and even quadrupling down sometimes on his whole "the election is rigged" refrain, even as his running mate Mike Pence said on the Sunday shows this weekend that the Republican ticket would honor the will of the voters, even if Hillary Clinton wins. Today, Trump was at it again, tweeting, quote, "Of course there is large-scale voter fraud happening on and before Election Day. Why do Republican leaders deny what is going on? So naive." To which Hillary Clinton's campaign manager, Robbie Mook, responded this way on a conference call with reporters. He said, quote, "Donald Trump's campaign is spiraling. He's desperately trying to shift attention from his own disastrous campaign. He knows he's losing, and he's trying to blame that on the system. This is what losers do, and we're not going to even give it any credit by amplifying it. It's not true. The system is not rigged." Mark, the conventional wisdom is that Trump has been laying the groundwork here with a bunch of excuses in case he loses, so he can kind of justify his failure. But do you think in the short term, i.e. pre-election, and in the medium to long term, i.e. post-election, do you think there are other objectives that he's pursuing by advancing this line of argument?
I think he's mostly doing it out of immaturity and like impulsiveness, and because he's surrounded by a bunch of people who believe in conspiracy theories. I actually think it's more that, and it's not achieving a short-term objective because it's crowding out news. The press is going to focus on it. He's going to fight with Republicans and Democrats about it. And if Trump has a chance to win, and he doesn't have a very good chance right now, it's if he's talking about change, if he's talking about Washington needing to be shaken up. So I don't think he's laying the groundwork as much as he's just impulsive, and he likes to, you know, prattle on. But I think it's for his own chances, it's ridiculously stupid.
Well, I think it's also, look, it's incredibly dangerous, the stuff he's saying right now.
Oh, that too.
And it's ridiculous. I mean, there has been a fair amount of study on the question of voter fraud over the course of the last few years when we've had debates in state after state after voter ID laws, and there have been a minuscule, de minimis number of proven cases of voter fraud before or on Election Day. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, I think it seems like what they're trying to do, and we've said this before, they're trying to depress turnout in general and then rile up the Trump base to turn out. Maybe they think that's the way to win. So maybe this is part of that, trying to rile up the base to try to say, look, if you don't get out there and vote for us, they're going to steal the election. That's the only way we can fight back. And I think the longer-term thing, in addition to making excuses for if he loses, the longer-term thing is to try to build some kind of movement. I don't know if that's going to be a business or what, but some kind of anti-Hillary Clinton movement after she gets elected president, if she gets elected president, that he can somehow capitalize on in terms of either power or money.
It'd be fascinating to see in the final 20-plus days how many of the days Trump actually talks about things that will help him get elected versus not.
Yeah, right.
All right, up next, why the State Department and the FBI released statements today about Hillary Clinton's emails. We're going to talk about that story when we come right back.
The conservative political world is up in arms today over the release of new FBI documents about the agency's investigation into Hillary Clinton's email practices as Secretary of State. The new disclosures indicate that a State Department official under Secretary Patrick Kennedy last year urged the FBI to downgrade the classification of one of Clinton's emails. Investigators wrote that Kennedy made his email request to an FBI agent, who in turn asked about getting the agency more office space overseas, leading to accusations of a possible quid pro quo. It is ambiguous at this hour about who brought up the idea and what that quid pro quo might have been, whether it was suggested, who might have suggested, who didn't. We also know, we do know that Kennedy's request was rebuffed. No classification changes were made. Still, Republicans are seizing on this entire story. Donald Trump has been tweeting about it all day, and his campaign called for Kennedy's resignation this afternoon. House Speaker Paul Ryan put out a statement of his own on the matter, saying the situation, quote, bears all the signs of a cover-up. Mark, what do you make of this, and where might it go?
Well, once again, I'll be a critic of the FBI. They should not be putting this stuff out. But having decided to put it out, they need to put it out with real transparency. There's so many redactions in this. I understand why there's suspicion, and I don't blame the Republicans politically or substantively for demanding more information. We simply don't know enough. It is not the role of the media or of the Republicans to give the benefit of the doubt to people in government. It's just not. And while some of the initial reports of this have overstated what we know and how definitively a State Department official might have been involved in the discussions about a quid pro quo, there are a lot of questions begged. And the FBI, I don't know what they're thinking. They're releasing these documents on an ad hoc basis with heavy redactions, only leading to more confusion, right, not clarification, and not public accountability.
Right. I agree with you. I think, we've differed about various things on these topics over the last months, but I think the FBI, if you look at the totality of how they've handled disclosures and talking about this case for months now, it's been less helpful rather than more helpful and more confusing rather than clarifying. Look, the Clinton campaign, we should say, is on the record today saying that this was Patrick Kennedy's request was just part of the normal interagency haggling over classification that takes place. I think it's strange that it would have been. I don't think this should be regarded as just customary, given the fact that it was happening after this had become a matter of great public controversy. So there are suspicions here. I think we should pursue them and try to figure it out. There may be more smoke here than fire, but there may also be fire here. And I think this story is going to linger for some days until we get answers to some of the questions that you and I have both raised here today.
And Republicans in this case should not be accused of being political, asking for more information, although Trump and others have gone too far based on what we know. But it is a real issue, and it should be investigated, and Republicans are going to talk a lot about it for sure. All right, there's another headache they're having in Clinton world. It has to do with the slow drip of WikiLeaks revelations that keep coming from John Podesta's inbox. Those emails, which allegedly are authentic, at least in some cases they seem to be, started dropping about a week ago, starting out with some excerpts from Clinton's Wall Street speeches. The alleged communiques then went through a series of daily disclosures, mostly involving what would be considered campaign gossip or insider stuff, including one in which a longtime Clinton aide, Doug Bann, referred to Chelsea Clinton as a spoiled brat. The disclosures continued all last week and into the weekend. There was one email, which Republicans have seized on, that seemed to the staff level mock evangelicals and conservative Catholics. That came from Jennifer Palmieri, this communications director. There was one purportedly showing Clinton allies polling on President Obama's ties to the Muslim faith and his past drug use back during the 2008 campaign. Then, over the last couple of days, came the release of what for a long time was considered the anti-Clinton holy grail, the transcripts of her 3 paid speeches to Goldman Sachs. That came out, and again, interesting stuff, but no game-changing revelations. So, John, a lot of interesting disclosures, some that speak to the culture of the Clinton campaign, but no mega bombshell so far. So where does that leave the current damage and potential threat of what we expect to be a continued drumbeat of disclosures?
Right. I mean, I agree these things are a lot of them are really interesting, and some of them are quite damning, not in ways that are surprising to me and you. And again, I'll say, talking to David Axelrod about this today for my podcast, The Culture Caucus, we had this conversation. He basically said that, some of these things were that were revealing about Clinton's campaign culture, but they weren't things he had a very dyspeptic view.